On this, the 14th day of August, the 8th month, in the year of our Lord 1953, we come to the concluding hour of our class term. And in this hour, if you will, I should like very much to give you an opportunity to have a deeper knowing, a clearer vision of my King. I have presented you before him and according to your response, he has received you. And now, I would let you know something more about him. In the world, it is considered to be a great honor to have a moment in which to meet the President of our great country and perhaps to shake his hand, or to be presented at court before some king or queen. And I would not detract from that, but if that be an honor, then the privilege of presentation before the King of Kings is far greater still. And perhaps one of the greatest impressions of this hour is and will be a deep spirit of thankfulness for the reality of eternity. For it will take that long for you to come to know him. It will take that long to come to know all that he has in store for you. There may be many wonderful and great impressions to begin with, but he who sees and knows enough to have any real impression will not have the impression that he knows him fully. I have served our King for many, many thousands of years and more. I have served with him in the particular capacity which I have at the present moment in his court. Since long before the beginning of the creation of this earth, he was gracious enough and kind enough to grant me the privilege of serving in a responsible position in his court long, long ago. There is no need for the mind to speculate as to what the pattern was before that. You couldn't comprehend it in any case. But some of you have sometimes wondered, perhaps marveled a little, at my personal attitude in relationship to my King. Every sort of human pressure in circumstance and in loss has been brought to bear to make me, or try to make me, violate my agreement with him. When I talk to you about creation, I may be using biblical texts to help you to understand. But I was there. I remember it and know it as you remember the things of yesterday. And I came into the world at this time to offer assistance to any man or any woman anywhere of any race or color or creed who might be inspired to want to know and serve my King. Yes, to know him is to love him, and to love him is to begin to know him. But the human mind tends to run into certain patterns of limitation in consciousness and concept, idea. If you try to picture him as you would a man, the vision will fall short. And yet, we saw him on earth a little while ago as a man. And in our hours of togetherness, we have meditated often and much upon the words he spoke, upon the life he lived, the things he did. We can see him to some degree as he was made manifest in the form of a man. And the life he lived engendered a very great love response in the world. And even though it be on a distorted pattern, the influence of his presence on earth has extended into all countries, all places, and to some degree there is love for him. But all too often it is love that is easily forgotten under the pressure of the circumstance of some moment in life. Something that for the moment is crowded out of consciousness. And the individual may, in such a circumstance, speak or act without regard to that love, without regard for the king. But as we learn to truly love him, we find that there is nothing that can make us forget. No pressure of circumstance, no pain, no sorrow, no loss that can come to man on earth can make us forget. Not even for a moment. When I approach such a presentation as this, I feel very keenly the limitations of words. The limitation of the symbolical means of portrayal. I have heard it said, more or less facetiously, with respect to the possibility when I may run out of words and wonder just how to say it, that will be the day. Well, this is the day. This is the day. Because no words of mine can adequately portray. So we must be in communion in spirit, that through the spirit of the word you may perceive to some degree that which I would portray for you in this brief hour. There is one thing to remember. One cannot live and move and have his being on the basis of a citizen of a kingdom unless one is keenly conscious of the king. If you are a citizen of a kingdom and you are not conscious of the king of the kingdom, having love, loyalty, not just admiration, not just respect, but deep devotion, you cannot possibly function in relationship to a kingdom. For there is no kingdom without a king. And the meaningfulness of a kingdom depends upon the king. And if there be no awareness of the king, there is no awareness of the kingdom. And our concern in this hour is that there should be, now and forevermore, an awareness of the king, of the kingdom. It is not that I would attempt to describe him to you. I could describe, perhaps in limited words, the manner of his appearance when he walked among men nearly 2,000 years ago. Some of the pictures give some little idea, but none of them are true. They're the imaginations of human beings. But he carried not a pompousness, but a simple dignity, which portrayed, for those eyes which could see, a true greatness. He never acted, even when man was rejecting him, as if he was less than himself. He had no need to try to exaggerate the appearance of himself. But he never depreciated it. His bearing not as of a king according to the concepts of men, but always the king as revealed from the standpoint of heavenly things. A ruggedness, a gentleness, unassuming, but powerful. I have seen strong men wilt before a single glance of his eye. And I have seen those who seem to be weak thrill and be uplifted by a look. I have seen patterns of attunement established in a few seconds. In an instant, it might seem, whereby one word in form meant more than could ever be spoken in words, by reason of the spirit of the word, by what was conveyed in just a word or two. So often human beings are inclined to try to analyze the words he spoke according to the record on the basis of simply thinking of them as words that any man might have spoken. Just as one might read a story. But it doesn't work. The words have meaning as one finds attunement with his spirit. And then one begins to have a feeling as if the words were almost unnecessary. Just a gentle, gracious touch to make it easier for finite human minds to grasp. Over and over again, certain of his disciples tried to, with their talk to others, establish an idea, an attitude, which would promote him as a king according to human concepts. And it always grieved him. And he would, by some gesture, some word, make all the talk seem to be as chaff before a wind, to be blown away. Over and over again, certain of his disciples tried to establish an environment, a pattern, which would show him off to advantage according to their ideas. And by a gesture or a word, he would make it seem to be as nothing. And oh, they would be hurt. They were trying to do something for him because they loved him, they said. But they were trying to decide what the setting should be, trying to shape it according to their ideas. And over again, because they didn't learn easily, some of them never learned, he made all their labors to be as nothing. And they couldn't understand why he should be so heartless, so cruel, why he would hurt themselves. Because, after all, they were trying to do something for him. Some of them never got the idea that he wasn't concerned about trying to be a king of some little earthly kingdom. That he was a king of kings, and that his kingdom included all the kingdoms of this world. Sometimes human ideas have pictured somehow that he had a whole host of angels and faithful saints and one thing and another trailing around behind him in heaven, that everywhere he went in heaven he'd be followed by this vast host of angels and saints, all shouting continually some sort of praise or the idea of glory. And I can think of nothing that would tend to turn heaven into hell for him more quickly than that. It's developed out of a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of something that is true. Follow him, follow his lead, follow out the vibrational pattern, but not a physical following to be crowding around him every minute, as if he just couldn't be left by himself. Well, probably he isn't too much by himself, but following him in that heavenly sense doesn't mean just tagging around like a puppy dog, just to be physically there. It means functioning in one's place in the pattern of the kingdom, so that if the cycle be initiated through him, if something is opened up, then they are with him. They follow his lead whithersoever he goeth, which is to say, in the cycles of the unfolding of time, in the determination of the patterns of creation, in the processes of living. The coordination, the harmony, is being pictured. Not of a vast group of saints or angels hovering about and trying to crowd in close and just hoping that angel so-and-so would get out so I could get up there. Oh, saint so-and-so, when will you ever move? You've been there such a long time. I'd like to get over there. No crowding, no need of it. No pushing, no shoving. To follow him as the king, because he is the king. And how did he become the king? Oh, I could tell you something about it. But not too much of it can be put into human words. But I'll tell you this. He became the king for two reasons. We all wanted him to be the king. And his king, his point of focalization in deity on beyond, selected him. Not just arbitrarily, but he selected him. For he in turn has a king, you know. In any case, from above and from below, he was selected. Why? Because we all loved him. Because it was his right and his place. From the standpoint of the divine design, there isn't any question about, well, now, how long is he going to be king? Maybe I can be king someday. Maybe we'll depose him and put somebody else in. No. From that standpoint, we might say that it's completely autocratic. Completely autocratic. We don't cast votes in heaven and say, well, now, I'd like to have a new king. He is there. And from the standpoint of those who know him, there's never any question about wishing someone else could be king for a while. Why? Because he fits. Because it's a perfect place for him. The vastness of his love, the wonder of his patience, all of the things that enter into it, I cannot begin to describe them all. But he is a King of Kings. Those who serve with him never wonder, how do you suppose that He'll back me up. He'll help me see this through, how to meet this situation. There is stability. We never think, perhaps, the king will have some vagrant fancy this morning and turn things upside down. No. We know we can depend upon him, and he acts as if, in relationship to some at least, that he can depend upon them. It's a good feeling. If we can depend upon him, then he should be able to depend upon us. And if we are ever to know how true it is that we can depend upon him, we must reach a point where he can depend upon us and make it stick. We never wonder if he'll have power enough to do what needs to be done. If he'll be patient enough, or if he'll love enough. Those who serve with him and are aware of him know that he has the power. There's no question but what it's his kingdom. They know the power is there. They don't go forth from his court wondering now, do you suppose it can be done? If he gives a commission, as he has given one to me, for instance, it never occurs to me to waste any time wondering, do you suppose it can be done? If the king said to do it, well then, we just do it, that's all. There are no ifs, maybes about it. We just do it. How? Well then, that's our business. It's my business. You think he tells me every turn to make? No. If he gives a commission, it's given. And then, in this instance, it's my business. If someone thinks that he or she would have done it some other way, probably that person doesn't know anything about 9/10 of the factors involved, but when it comes down to it, it's my business. A commission, a job to do. So we don't question and say among ourselves, do you suppose it can be done? Argue the thing, pro and con. We don't have that kind of a king. We wouldn't have a commission unless it could be done. And for those who know him truly, there's just simply never any thought of possibly disobeying him. He doesn't make life miserable setting up a lot of do's and don'ts, trying to tell you how to turn around, what to do on every occasion. No. His commands are simple. His expectations just. And if we really know him, it simply never occurs to us that we might disobey. Disobey? What would that be? To disappoint him? Well, for myself, I would rather cease to be for the rest of eternity than to disappoint him. No. Some of you have seen it put to the test. There's never any question that enters the mind of those who know him. I wonder if I can get out of it. Do you suppose I just have to do that? I don't want to do that, but I guess I'll have to. It's my duty. I'm serving the king, so it's my duty now. I'll have to go out and do that. But I'd rather not. No. Any person who talks like that hasn't come to know him. Because if we know him, there isn't anything we'd rather do than what he wants us to do. It doesn't make any difference. You may say, well, then his slightest wish would be command. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it would. His slightest wish, an absolute command. And it would never occur to me to wish something else. But what about this matter of free choice? What about living an individual life? That must mean then that you're just sort of an automaton. If he wishes that, why, without any questioning, without anything, you just go do it. Wait till you start to do it. And then see if you don't have plenty of chance to live. Plenty of chance to use all your intelligence. Plenty of chance to express your individuality. We don't try to express our individuality in the sense of arguing with the king. If he gives a commission, well, then that's the commission. And it isn't a matter of, I'd rather do that. Because if it were, you wouldn't have the commission. And as long as you have a case of I'd rathers, you'll never have a real commission. You may begin to move toward it. But one of the most devastating things is a peculiar disease that tends to show up around the borders of the kingdom. You know, sort of a no man's land there where you're coming across the border. People very often get an attack of I'd rathers. I'd rather do that. I'd rather do the other. I'd rather do something else. It's a funny thing. There's an absolute quarantine at the border. And those who have I'd rathers can't get in. It's an absolute quarantine. And anyone afflicted with I'd rathers has to stay out until he gets well or dies. And then he stays out, of course. Once we begin to be citizens of the kingdom, servants of the king, there's just one thing. We have found that the greatest pleasure we can know, the deepest satisfaction, the highest ecstasy, the greatest fulfillment comes as we serve with him, not against him. And if you think he doesn't give us plenty of chance to exercise all of our capacities and to prove ourselves as individuals, you're very wrong. No, he doesn't try to think for us. He doesn't try to act for us. He gives us a chance to be and to do if we're ready. If we're ready. But in this, we have learned speaking from the outer standpoint of consciousness, that man's idea about opposites is so false. So many people have the idea that you can't have pleasure without some pain. Self-active pleasure does bring some pain. That's true. But heavenly pleasure doesn't have an aftermath of pain. The joy is satisfaction. And there is no joy that a human being can know or thinks that he can know in disregarding the things of God, but what he can know fulfilling the things of God. God made the body and all of its parts. God gave us our various capacities. There isn't one single thing that man might call pleasure that he wants to do self-actively, but what he could do creatively in the kingdom. He doesn't have to lose. God doesn't take away the pleasures. He gives us an opportunity to have pleasure without pain, joy without sadness, life without death, victory without defeat. But you have to have defeat before you can have victory. But he doesn't rub it in. You find that the moment you let yourself be defeated in a contest with him, you share his victory. Because he's that kind of a king. The moment you let him win, you become the honored guest. You may say, well, that kind of a pattern, I'd like to be the honored guest without letting him win. It won't work, I might as well tell you. It just won't work. And it doesn't mean that you have to have some of that characteristic that emerges in the patterns of distortion of licking someone's boots, so to speak. No. Human beings sometimes assume that that's what it is. But, you see, my attitude is taken from my king's attitude. I have the same pattern to go by. And when you acknowledge defeat, you have won. And then you don't have to be defeated anymore. But there isn't anything more futile than trying to defeat my king. He lives in an absolutely impregnable place where human beings can't get to him. Their guns and their bombs can't reach his castle. They can't fly there in an airplane. They can't die and go there to try to get the job done. They can't reach him. It's impregnable. And another thing about it is that trying to wait until he dies so that you can work out a change of situation won't work either, because you'll die first. Trying to defeat my king is absolutely the most futile, foolish, and senseless business I can possibly think of. He's that kind of a king. If you destroy yourself, no matter how much misery you put yourself in, say, well, if I suffer enough, maybe he'll yield then. Oh, no, he won't. I don't care what you do. Millions and billions of human beings have tried before you and never succeeded. He's that kind of a king. It doesn't make any difference how much you make yourself suffer, how much of a martyr you make of yourself, or how sorry you are for yourself. You either do it his way or not at all. And he will not change one tiny little law for you. It's absolute. He won't change one tiny little law. No matter how much you suffer, no matter how you try to persuade him, begging or anything else, it makes absolutely no difference. You can go through a life of misery and die, or millions like you, or billions like you, and he still wouldn't change a single law. Sometimes people imagine that he had one set of laws a long time ago and he's got a different set of laws now. No, that isn't true. Exactly the same set of laws that were established in the beginning when man was first created, and they're at work now. The same laws, the same circumstances, the same situation. We either obey or we do not. And if we do not, well, then we bring the consequences on ourselves, and we can suffer as long as we can continue to exist. And he wouldn't change one tiny little law to get you to stop suffering. No. You will have to change to fit the law, because he won't change the law to fit you. He's that kind of a king. If that were not so, the rest of us wouldn't have anything to depend on. Suppose you did petition him to change the law a little bit to fit you, and the rest of us woke up the next morning and we were going to do it this way, but now, oh, that law has changed, is it? How come it's changed? So-and-so prayed to have that law changed, and I thought I'd just let so-and-so have his way. Oh, who's king? After all, who is? We know where our king is. And we don't have to wonder if he's going to change the laws overnight because someone thought they prayed a prayer and asked him to. So, you can wear yourself out contending with him if it pleases you, but it won't do you any good. No matter how much you suffer, no matter how much you wail, no matter how much you fuss and fume, you know, it won't make him change anything. Not anything. That's why he's dependable. Because the rest of us know that we can depend on his laws to work. And as soon as you realize that, you can let yourself change, stop fighting with him, and begin to enjoy the blessings of those laws. And you won't say, well, why does God permit war? Why does he permit the other thing? Oh, because human beings are contending with his laws. They refuse to let his law control, so let them suffer. He doesn't want them to suffer. He's offering the love. But no matter how many people suffer, he will not change his laws one iota. They're absolute. And there's nothing more futile than trying to get him to change a law or to contend with him or fight with him in any way. He's that kind of a king. He's my king. And I'd advise strongly that you begin to realize that working with his laws, you can have every blessing in heaven and earth. Work against them, and you'll make yourself miserable until your body turns to a corpse. And you will gain nothing. You see, actually, when there was war in heaven, and man's consciousness was cast out of heaven here on earth, I had something to do with it. And my king didn't have to fight. He didn't have to raise a hand. He didn't have to brandish a sword. He didn't even have to say, get out of here, to the dragon and his angels. It was all done for him. Absolutely. He didn't have to turn a hand over. He doesn't have to fight. He doesn't have to contend, and in fact he doesn't. He's that kind of a king. Because whatever needs to be done, someone does it for him. And it wouldn't make any difference if it took the death of 10 billion people. Or any other number. No. 100 billion. Let them die if they refuse to learn. The death God has no pleasure in the death of them that die. My King doesn't. But you're suffering and you're dying, you're doing anything, you're complaining, you're fretting, you're stewing, will not change him. But you can let yourself be changed and begin to enjoy his kingdom. And it's a wonderful place. And he's a wonderful king. And what I've said can't be anything more than just the faintest of a suggestion. I can't tell you what a wonderful king he is. But if you stop fighting with him and begin to work with him, after enough time and the cycles of eternity has gone by, you'll begin to know. And I thank God for the privilege of serving him by serving you who turn toward him. And so, let us serve together. And as we truly serve together here on earth, serving our Lord and King, no matter what the limitations, no matter what seems to be against us, we know that it'll be done. We can afford to wait. Of course, we've got plenty to do, but it doesn't have to be just so today. If someone hasn't learned a lesson yet, let them suffer it out a little more. Let them stew. Perhaps they'll wake up. We can wait. The human being in self-activity cannot. He can't afford it, so he tries to rush things. But you can't rush heaven, and you can't rush my King. It won't work. But there are plenty of things waiting to be received by you and by all who will become worthy, dependable, loyal citizens of his kingdom. And so concludes our GPC Servers Training School for this term. God bless you and keep you in the way. And let's serve our King forever.